everybody. So this is another First Chapter Friday. So what we are going to read today is called The House That Wasn't There. And this is by Elana K. Arnold. We're only going to read the first chapter today because that's what we do on Fridays. So let's open this one up. This is actually, I believe, a new book that has been put into our library. I have not been able to open it up yet, but it is, and I'm pretty sure most of us haven't opened this book this year. So it's called The House That Wasn't There. Once, not very long ago, there were two houses side by side. In one house lived a boy, in the other lived no one. But that and everything else was about to change. Let me tell you what happened. Chapter 1. The boy's name was Adler. He was 11 and a half years old, and he had lived in the house at 15 Rolling Wood Drive since before he could remember. In fact, he had been born there, in the bathtub to be exact, something his mother liked to tell visitors to the home, something that Adler had been proud of until about 2 years ago, when suddenly he was not. Once there had been 3 people who lived together at 15 Rollingwood Drive: Adler, his mother, Greta, and his father, whom everyone had called Canary because of his voice. Adler had just been 3 years old when his father died. Taken by a short, sudden illness, he had no memories of his father or his father's voice, except from the recordings he had left behind. Sometimes Adler wished that the recordings had been left for him alone, but the truth was that Canary's voice was quite well known, as he'd had a brief but brilliant flame of success, earning enough money before he died at age 31 to ensure that Adler and his mother would never have to worry too much about money, as long as they were careful. As his mother liked to tell Adler, they had a comfortable nest egg, upon which they could rely as if that was all they needed to know. Sometimes, though, when Adler was entirely alone, and when the room was very dark, and when he was no longer awake, but also not quite yet asleep, he felt that he could remember something about his father. The smell of him, a sort of sharp burning, like a just-smoked cigarette, mixed with the fresh scent of new-cut grass. Adler was not sure if that was a real memory. He could have asked his mother, for she was the kind of person who would tell him the truth, whether he liked it or not. But he never shared this scent memory with her, partly because it was the only thing he had had of his father's that he didn't have to share with anyone else, and partly because it might not be a real memory at all, a possibility Adler did not know if he could bear. The house at 15 Rollingwood Drive was small, but neat. The floors were wood, scratched in some places, sun-bleached in others, like under the wide front window, and in patches where lights shone through the glass arches in the green door. The furniture, most of it, had been in the house as long as Adler could remember. The pink velvet couch in the front room that slumped a bit in the middle, where it had been sat upon the most. The wooden TV stand, with all the electrical gear on top it. The TV, of course, and the cable box, and Adler's gaming system, and various remote controls, which Adler's mom called the clackers, even though they didn't clack. In the afternoons, the front room was kept cool by the wide green foliage of the walnut street outside. Though it technically sat in the neighbor's yard, it leaned towards his, as if it wanted to be closer. It cast a helpful shadow onto Adler's house, and that shadow was comfortably reliable presence, growing and shrinking as daylight waxed and waned. The fern that squatted and spread on the small round table next to the couch had lived there a long time too, but not as long as Adler and his mother. She had given him the fern 4.5 years ago, for his 7th birthday, when Adler had gone through a short phase during which he considered a future career as a horticulturist. after learning the term and thinking it sounded very important and interesting. After a few months, it had become clear that Adler was perhaps not horticulturally blessed when his mother had to save the fern from a near death by thirst. She moved it then from his bedroom to the front room, where she could keep an eye on it, and Adler had felt vaguely relieved to have escaped the burden of having to keep the plant alive. Aside from the couch and the electrical things and the fern, the house was filled with all the usual stuff: books and puzzles and stacks of paper, old coffee tins full of pennies and buttons and nails, baskets full of knitting stuff, and an opossum that wasn't alive anymore but once had been, named Mort. Mort had been an anniversary gift from Adler's dad to Adler's dad to Adler's mother, before Adler had been born. Adler knew the story by heart, how his parents, before they were parents, had taken a trip to Seattle, where they toured the Space Needle and roamed Pike Place Market and stumbled upon Ballyhoo Curiosity Shop, a strange place in the basement of a building that boasted, among other things, a large set of insects preserved in clear resin, a variety of skulls and antique dolls, and an assortment of taxidermy, including a two-headed calf, a wall-mounted raccoon hide end, and Mort. I don't know why the opossum struck us as particularly funny, Adler's mom had told him. There were many other things, odder things in the curiosity shop, but something about him, his teeth maybe, the way it almost looked as though he were smiling, sent both of us in absolute hysteria. We were laughing so hard we had to leave the shop. But a few months later, on our anniversary, our 1-year wedding anniversary, to be exact, when I opened the box Canary put on my lap, it was the same opossum smiling up at me. At this point in the story, Adler's mom always looked fondly at the possum, who ruled over the front room and from his position on the top shelf of the bookcase. "Your father had called the shop and paid for it by phone," she would say. "And here he is, even though Canary isn't." And then she'd stare a moment longer at the opossum, and then she'd blink, and she'd come back to the present moment, back to Adler. And she'd pat him on the knee, or pull him into her side, or kiss his forehead and stroke his hair. Sometimes, when his mom wasn't around, like when she'd trust him to stay alone while she ran to the grocery store, or the odd occasions where he'd find himself awake early on a Sunday morning while his mother was still asleep, Adler would move a kitchen chair near the bookcase and climb up to take a closer look at the taxidermied opossum. "Mort," Adler would whisper, and he'd click his fingernail against a glassy eye. Of course, the opossum never answered. Aside from that front room, there was the bedrooms, Adler's, his mom's, and a third, which was technically a bedroom, even though it had no bed. The kitchen, the big bathroom, with a bathtub in which Adler had been born, and one small bathroom, with just a toilet and a sink. The eating nook attached to the kitchen, and the small rectangular dining room where Adler did his homework and where he and his mother put together puzzles. The music stuff was in the dining room, because that was where they usually listened. The record player and records, and the newer stuff too, the speakers that could play music streamed from a computer or cell phone. It was at the dining room table, usually in the evenings, usually while puzzling, that Adler and his mother listened to his father's songs. In that room, too, hung one of the portraits of the three of them, posed in front of a huge, beautiful walnut tree in the yard. Adler in the foreground upon his mother's lap, a fat, round, white baby with a shock of near black curls and big, dark blue eyes framed by embarrassingly long lashes. His mother, hair longer than now, dark blonde with a touch of strawberry redness, parted in the middle and falling around Adler like a cape. A bright smile on her face, her eyes turned down toward the baby on her lap, and Canary standing behind them both, looking straight into the camera with a broad, happy grin. a hand on each of his wife's shoulders. His brown hair was pushed back from his brow. He wore a lustrous beard. He was, they all were, so very much alive. It was folk music, Adler's mother told him, that Canary made. Adler sort of loved to listen to his father singing, and sort of hated it at the same time. His father had played the banjo, accompanying himself as he sang. Wandering down the railroad tracks away from my sweet home, wandering on the railroad tracks where I next will roam, whispering on the railroad tracks why the wind has blown, wandering down the railroad tracks away from my sweet home. Each note from the banjo was a wail, a twang, a whisper, and when Canary joined in, half the sounds out of his mouth weren't words at all. They were more like crooning and cooing and chirping. Maybe that was why they called him Canary. Though his voice was deep and rich, not high and sharp, still the rise and fall of it could tell a story, even without any words. And the banjo told its story too, as if to answer Canary's call, slow, then fast, then slow again. And Adler would sit, a puzzle piece in his hand, listening as if maybe this time the song would have new words, better words, words that meant something, but it never did. In any case, other than the fact that his father was dead, Adler's life was rather unextraordinary. He lived in his comfortable house, surrounded by the things he loved. The music and the bathtub, the pink couch and the puzzles, the clackers and Mort, with the walnut tree's gentle shadow and his wonderful, though sometimes embarrassing, mother at 15 Rolling Wood Drive. This was true, at least, until late summer, when the girl was moved in next door, and Adler, for the first time in his relatively quiet life, experienced what it felt like to be truly furious with someone. So that's our first chapter. So this book, like I said, is called The House That Wasn't There. Like I said, is called The House That Wasn't There by Elana. The chapters are a little bit longer, but I think it just kind of depends on what you like. I liked this first chapter. I thought it was pretty good. So if you'd like to check out this book, it is in our library. And if you need help, I'm always here. In order to help. Hopefully next week we will have another book to read for our first chapter Friday.